Hey everyone, it's Ken Brands at Bad Brands, and I'm here with the first installment of our YouTube story and first installment of one of several series we hope to develop, book reviews. Today I'm reviewing 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing by Ries and Trout. A little bit of background: our company uses Shopify dropshipping to host select clothing and home lifestyle products on our website. This book presents a unique perspective of marketing focused around the perspective of the customer rather than a battle of products. In addition to developing your product, you also have to develop your brand, and how you market your product is how you define your brand. Ries and Trout do a great job using different real-life companies in different markets to drive each point across. That's part of what makes this such a great read. Its examples help the reader relate the laws to their products. But I won't take away from the read, only briefly go through and summarize my key takeaways from the book in hopes that they may spark some ideas on how you can spice up your brand and your marketing campaign. So let's dive in. It's best to be first. That's the gist of the first law: leadership. No duh, right? But that's important. Depending on what you're interested in, there may already be a dense market, so getting a foot in the door may bode difficult. Leading us to the law of category. Instead of a giant market, perhaps go after a subcategory you know you can be the best at. Then your market should revolve around making people prefer your product. Your marketing may not be able to compete against giants head on, but going after one of their weaker lines can get you in the conversation. The law of mind is next. I say shoe, you say Nike, Adidas. You don't become first mind overnight though. The law of perception is where Ries and Trout will lose some traditional marketers. Instead of looking at marketing as a product battle, they suggest focusing on the minds of prospective customers who take on their own perceptions as the truth. How do you change their mind? Or don't change their mind, but still appeal overall. This requires elegance. Which brings us to the law of focus. Pick one word or phrase and brand it into the minds of your audience. That word or phrase is the theme of your marketing campaign. This requires consistency. The law of exclusivity boils down to no two companies sharing the same phrase or word. Obviously, being original is a good strategy from a marketing standpoint, but also from a legal standpoint. By the law of ladders, we can compare a market category to a ladder, and each brand is on the ladder and shares a piece of the market, a piece of the audience for that market, with the brands above and below them on the ladder. Therefore, you should aim for your spot on the ladder based on your capacity and work to answer the question of how your program deals with your position on the ladder. The law of duality takes a close-up view relative to the law of ladders. Inevitably, you are trying to move up the ladder, so you are in immediate competition with the next brand on the ladder. Your market is temporarily geared to surpass the brand ahead of you. To an extent, you fight short-term battles with the brand ahead of you, blow for blow. The law of opposite reiterates this, but from a different view. Sometimes it's okay to settle for second. If you think about the data giants, Facebook, Google, Amazon, Tesla, if, say, Facebook were leading in value ahead of Google, this is still a strong second for Google. The law of opposite says to embrace and sometimes even aim for second place by doing something the opposite of your competition. The law of attributes builds off the law of duality and opposite and actually appears later in the book, but I didn't want to backtrack later. In the same mindset, focus on a different attribute of your product than your competition. If they talk about their gum makes their breath smell fresh, talk about how your gum helps prevent cavities, and send me a sample. Love gum. By the law of division, market categories will divide into smaller categories. For new and smaller market categories such as compact cars, as the example in the book, emphasis should be placed on timing, aiming to give the product time to develop, but not introduce the product too soon in a market where attention is limited. Next is perspective, not to be confused with perception, which we covered earlier. My favorite example from this book is the example of sales. Sales give the customer the perspective to buy at that price and otherwise not buy the product, whereas the sale also gives the vendor the illusion to expect as many customers as during the sale. This leads to outlets endlessly having sales and eventually going bankrupt. Avoid couponing. Line extension is taking your brand name and slapping it on a modified version of your original product. The only problem with this is the original brand shares the bad publicity of the new line. The book uses 7-Up as an example. Had it been written more current, in this day and age, it may have used Mountain Dew. Sacrifice leads to success, specifically sacrificing the things that will stretch your brand too thin. Concentrate on one service, specialize, and avoid the disasters of having too much going on. The law of candor. Honesty is the best policy. Admitting a negative can help the customer see the positive. The negative may be inevitable. Accidents are inevitable when driving cars, but Volvo focuses their product and their brand on protecting the drivers in the event of an accident. The law of singularity. In each situation, only one move will produce substantial results. So don't get caught up in the numbers. Focus on what the best move is at that juncture in time. The law of unpredictability. You can't predict the future, therefore short-term planning, working with the trends, and working with your angle or phrase that differentiates you is the safest, especially if your competition releases the same idea right before you, which can happen. You don't want to have extrapolated years in advance just to scrap all that work. I changed the order up here as well because I thought unpredictability sets a stage for the law of failure. You should expect and accept failures as a constant. Admit, fix, and move on. Bringing us to the law of success. Success leads to arrogance, which leads to failure. You can never be humble enough. Keep your tact as you begin to succeed and your brand begins to grow. Success influences line extensions, so don't do it. Stay consistent. Out of order again, the law of acceleration. Your success may just be a fad, and you don't want that. This figure shows exactly why. You want a long-term trend, and consistency is the key to this. Going back now to the law of hype. A company that does well doesn't need any hype. In fact, hype could be a sign that the company is not doing too well. Look at this among your competition as you start to show up on more radars. Last but not least, the law of resources. It goes without saying that without money you can't do much of anything, so you may end up pitching your ideas to existing companies or vendors. Pitching to larger companies can bode difficult, and it may be better to pitch to a smaller company that's more accepting of your ideas. If your product or idea is going to reshape the market, it won't matter if you start with a small company or a big company. You'll shape the market either way. So that was a lot to cover. I hope some of the key takeaways sparked something in your mind, and I hope you decided to give this book a good read for some good real-world examples. I won't make this video any longer by promoting our site or asking you to like or subscribe, but if you have comments for the newcomers to the game or suggestions for us, please leave one below. Otherwise, thank you, goodbye, and until next time.